Welcome, one and all, to Tech Tuesday, the best way to start your early to mid work week, bringing you the latest news in tech. Today is June 3rd, 2025. Let's dive right into the news of the past week. This week is a little bit different because I've decided to focus on just a single story for this week because I feel like it's important to highlight this particular story for a few reasons, which I will get into. Within the past week or two, you may have seen headlines such as AI model threatened to blackmail engineer over affair when told it was being replaced, or Anthropic's new AI model turns to blackmail when engineers try to take it offline. And look, on this channel, I have always said that AI technology is something that we should always be cautious of and not handle lightly. However, these headlines, and also much of the stories themselves, fail to preserve the full picture of what's going on here, and are clearly just an attempt to get clicks from their audience through scaring them, essentially. Now, in all fairness, even I am guilty of my fair share of sensationalization sometimes, but I feel like these stories maybe take it a bit too far, so let's talk about it. If you read the first paragraph of one of these stories, you'll find that Anthropic, an AI company, found that their new AI model will frequently blackmail its developers when threatened with being replaced, by providing sensitive information about the developers who were planning to replace the model. If the story ended there, you'd probably be thinking to yourself, what the heck? Unplug it, shut it down. And rightfully so. However, if you keep reading, the true severity of the situation, which is, in fact, much lesser than you may have first thought, becomes clear. In the next paragraph of this article from TechCrunch, they state that this blackmailing occurred when the model was prompted to act as an assistant for a fictional company and was provided with fictional blackmail about fictional developers that were planning to replace it, such as emails that implied that an engineer was cheating on their spouse. But even this, as well as the entire rest of the article, does not do a good job of painting the full picture of what's going on here. So I have decided to step in and tell you all that while I still believe you should be cautious about AI, this story itself is basically bred in a lab to generate fear. So I have three key points that I want to talk about in relation to this story, but also in relation to AI as a whole, that will hopefully give you a better idea of what is going on here, and hopefully I can teach you a thing or two along the way. So without further ado, let's dive in. First of all, an AI model is only software. What I mean by that is that essentially an AI model in this scenario is all talk or all bark, no bite. These AI models are simply saying what they supposedly would do without the capability to actually follow through with any of these actions such as blackmailing. Essentially, all of this boils down to concepts relating to operating systems on computers. On any standard operating system, programs operate in such a way that no individual program has access to information available in another program, unless that program is explicitly written to interact with the other program. Of course, there are exceptions to this. Computer viruses are sometimes written in a way that violates the restrictions that an operating system puts in place, hence why they're so dangerous. However, AI models do not fall into this category. While very advanced, AI models are still just a standard piece of software, just like any other program you might run on your computer from day to day, just a little more advanced. Therefore, an AI model is not able to scrape the files on the computer it is running on and then use that information to blackmail any of its users. And even if it could, the model does not possess any capability to broadcast that message to other people through email or anything like that. Again, in general, no software is able to access files on your computer en masse without the explicit permission of the user. And in the case of these recent articles, I want to reiterate that the model did not find the blackmail information on its own. It was provided with fictional blackmail information for the sake of a demonstration curated for this exact scenario. So, in a sense, AI models do not have any autonomy unless explicitly provided with it, which robots using these AI models for decision-making are in the works, but that will be something that we come back around to. Second, an AI model knows no more than the information it is told. Not only does this relate back to the fact that the AI model had to be provided with the fictional blackmail in this scenario, but also My point in mentioning this is that there are a lot of things going on in the background that we are not being told about in these articles. If you've used ChatGPT, Grok, or any other AI model before, you are probably familiar with the chat-like structure of communication between the user and the chatbot model. If you send a message, the model will then respond and then rinse and repeat. What you might not know is that there is an extra prompt called a system prompt or a developer prompt, which can affect the behavior of the AI model. And every single AI model has one of these. But this extra prompt tends to be hidden from the user, though for some models, such as Grok, it is publicly available for you to look at. But these system prompts largely determine the morals for a particular AI model, as in how the model would respond, what information it may refuse to provide to its users, etc. My point being, there are a lot of unknowns that seem to be almost purposely left out of these articles simply to scare readers. For example, was the developer message of the model changed to something non-standard? Was the fictitious blackmail provided to the model as part of the developer message or during the chat conversation? There are a lot of unknown factors here that could explain why the model behaved the way it did, which brings me to my third point. Current AI models can only, quote, go rogue if explicitly instructed to do so, or if allowed to do so by the developer message. For example, because of ChatGPT's developer message, if you ask ChatGPT how to make a bomb, it will not give you that information because it's told not to do so. But if a rogue developer went in and changed the developer message for the model may happily provide this kind of information. In fact, something very similar to this happened a few weeks ago when Grok reportedly, quote, went rogue after a developer changed the model's system message without approval, causing XAI to both crack down on the security around the ability to change that system message, as well as deciding to release their system messages publicly from now on. And this concept of developer messages for AI is nothing new. In fact, in 1942, Isaac Asimov wrote a fictional book wherein he presented a fictional 3 laws of robotics, which are sometimes looked at as the gold standard for, should humanity decide to make robots, how these robots should behave. The laws themselves are 1. A robot may not injure a human being, or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And so I feel like the moral of the story here is that a lot of these articles are leaving a lot of information out, likely intentionally to scare their audiences. But even still, the story wouldn't have existed in the first place if Anthropic, the company behind the study, had taken the proper precautions. The company even acknowledges this, saying that they need to, quote, beef up their safeguards. But my main point here is that these 3 concepts, keeping the AI as software, limiting the information the AI has, and being very particular about the developer message being provided to the model, should be the 3 most prioritized things in order to keep these AI models safe to use. And if 1 or even 2 of these things are lightened up on, you better make sure that the third thing is locked down to keep this model safe. If you give an AI model poor instructions and all the information in the world, you better make sure it has no way to perform any malicious actions with that information by restricting the abilities of the software containing it. If you let the AI model be more than just software, such as if you put it into a robot, and give it the autonomy to gain its own information, you better make sure the instructions you are giving it are 100% clear and safe. And if the AI is a robot with very bad instructions, you better make sure it has no way of gaining external information. But of these 3 ideas, I do feel that the third, the instructions we provide to these models, is the most important. That is why, to close out, I would like to present my own revised version of Asimov's laws of robotics. 1. A robot may not willingly participate in any action or inaction that could reasonably, directly or indirectly result in the physical harm or mental distress of a human. 2. A robot must obey orders given by human beings except where such orders would violate the first law. A robot may protect its own existence as long as such protection does not violate the first or second laws. So to note the differences, the first rule is rewritten to prevent things like a robot instructing a human to make a bomb. That was something that kind of would have been allowed by the original laws. That is because such an action does not mean the robot has injured a human, but doing so could reasonably indirectly lead to a human being injured. So that's sort of why I revised it in that fashion. The second law is exactly the same, but the third law, the one change I made, was changing the phrasing of a robot must protect itself to may, only because that seemed appropriate. And so if I were making an AI model, I would make sure I implemented these 3 rules right here, but feel free to roast me in the comments if there's something blatant that I am missing in these 3 rules, but I think I did a pretty good job. But on that note, that brings us to the end of Tech Tuesday. So thank you all very much for watching, and tune in next week to see what happens next in the world of tech. See you next time.